All right, welcome to Hannity. We start with a massive Fox News alert. Breaking just moments ago, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced that she will not hold a vote to officially authorize an impeachment inquiry against President Trump. Guess why? She doesn't have the votes. According to Politico, the idea has been met with anxiety among some of those battleground Democrats. Look at your screen. Look at your state. These are all the Democrats in districts that Donald Trump won in 2016. Oh, politics come into play with this impeachment fantasy of Democrats. Those are the lawmakers who, by the way, will make or break the radical Socialist Democratic Party's impeachment dreams. As of tonight, they are the reason Pelosi won't dare hold a vote because she's probably going to lose. And ultimately, will they try to undo the will of their own voters? Will they attempt to overthrow these people? Overthrow a president because of a hoax and the radicals haven't taken over their parties? Will they give in to the media mob's lies and conspiracy theories and outright hysteria? Also breaking tonight so far, the radical Democrats' impeachment dreams, they are on hold. Pelosi doesn't have the votes. The unauthorized official, unofficial, unconstitutional inquiry, that will continue with no resolution, no end in sight, and, of course, no consideration of any rights for the president or anyone else for that matter. We have a lot more coming up in the course of this hour. Also tonight, we begin a cloud of corruption hanging over the Biden family's shady business dealings. Now, for anyone with a functioning brain, could not be more obvious. Hunter Biden, his son, profited off his father's international diplomacy in Ukraine and China. We're talking about millions upon millions of dollars, lucrative international deals tailored to literally be made for Hunter Biden, which, by the way, based on his own admission today, he wasn't qualified for, and he got only because of his last name and his access to the vice president of the United States. Well, don't take it from me. Just listen to Hunter Biden himself and try and explain why he was hired to serve on the board of a corrupt Ukrainian oil and gas company in 2014, having no experience with Ukraine, oil, gas, or energy. Well, by the way, none. Zero. Take a look.
There's been a lot of misinformation about me, not about my dad. Nobody buys that, but it buys this idea that I was unqualified to be on the board.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board, if not more.
In the list that you gave me of the reasons why you're on that board, you did not list the fact that you were the son of the vice president.
Of course, yeah. No,
what role do you think that played?
I think that it is impossible for me to be on any of the boards that I just mentioned without saying that I'm the son of the vice president of the United States.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
Oh, he's admitting it. He made millions with no experience whatsoever. None. Zero. And what role? Well, I don't know anything about it. And would you get it because if you had a different name? No. Wow. But he did serve on the board of Amtrak. That's what launched his lucrative career in Ukraine and energy, and the way that Hunter Biden's qualifications, let's see, serve on a board of Amtrak. I bet he took a ride on a train one day with his father. That's a great way to be a millionaire and get on that board. That seems to be how he gets to land all of these high-paying jobs. And what did he do for them? Definitely not in his resume. Now, he definitely couldn't pass a background check with that. He was fired from the Navy because of drug use. And, of course, none of that seems to matter to the corrupt media mob. They keep doing their very best to sweep all of this corruption under the rug. They call any accusation of misconduct against the former vice president a disproven conspiracy theory. Problem with that lie is that everything we have been reporting about the Biden family business of corruption is dead on accurate. He had no experience. I don't think I would have gotten any of these things except for my dad, who was the vice president. Let me tell you, what have we ever told you that's wrong about this? Nothing. Did Hunter Biden make millions of dollars from a Ukrainian oil giant and gas company, an energy company, while his father was the point person for Ukraine in the Obama administration? Check. The answer is yes. Was Hunter Biden qualified for this position at Burisma Holdings? Check. No, he was not. Did Vice President Biden also brag about leveraging $1 billion of your tax dollars to demand that a Ukrainian prosecutor get fired? Same prosecutor who says, according to ABC and the Washington Post, that he and his son was being investigated by that prosecutor. Biden's on tape bragging about leveraging our tax dollars in a shakedown to get a Ukrainian prosecutor fired, in case you forgot. Take a look.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
Well, son of a, he got fired. My son got rich. Now, why didn't ABC News ask Hunter about that video? It would have been a good question. In fact, where there was virtually no follow-up questions at all, could you imagine, by the way, how would the media mob be reacting if you replaced the name Joe and Hunter Biden with, say, Donald Trump and Don Jr.? The hysteria would be off the charts. They would treat it like the single biggest pay-to-play scandal in the history of this country. It would lead every newscast. It would be on the front page of every newspaper. Let's see. Joe Biden's son, while he's vice president, is making all these millions of dollars. But they never talked about it. I don't believe that either. And guess what? This is only the tip of the iceberg. As vice president, wherever sleepy, creepy, crazy Uncle Joe went, well, when his son Hunter was right behind him, lining his own pockets. And when Vice President Biden took Air Force Two to China, who was on board? Hunter, of course. Then magically, less than 10 days later, Hunter and his business partners landed a $1.5 billion private equity deal from the Bank of China. And Hunter Biden had zero experience with China, zero experience, once again, in private equity. But the government of China decided to fund Biden's firm. I guess they didn't want to go to a real firm like Goldman Sachs or Bain Capital, or let's see, Deutsche Bank or J.P. Morgan or Citibank, well-established. One of those private equity firms just goes to Biden and Whitey Bulger's nephew. But Hunter wants you to think this is all a perfectly normal way to do business. Apparently in the Biden shady criminal family enterprise, what it looks like to me, I guess it is. Take a look.
We saw you in those photos getting off of Air Force Two with your daughter, with your father.
I have traveled everywhere with my dad. And I went there because my daughter was on the trip, too.
But did you talk about China or your deal with China?
No.
A 12-hour flight over?
No, of course not.
That never came up?
No.
Your father did shake hands with Mr. Lee, though, correct, in the lobby of that hotel?
I don't remember, but probably. Yeah, I hope so. I hope he did. He was my friend.
Jonathan Lee.
Yeah, for almost 13 years.
He was your friend and your business partner.
But I understand. So really, Amy, whether I'm in New York or whether I'm in Washington, D.C., a friend and a business associate is in the hotel, and my dad's staying there. Is it inappropriate for me to have coffee with them? I don't
so that
find
meeting
anything
was
wrong.
not a mistake. It was not unethical.
100% not. No.
What do you say to people who believe this is exactly why people hate Washington? A vice president's son can make money in countries where your father is doing official government business.
By the way, well, I don't know what to tell you. I made a mistake in retrospect as it related to creating any perception that was wrong.
10 days later, $1 billion. Wow. Once again, no real effort on ABC's part to follow up with a simple question like, why haven't you made money from this business deal? Because he said, I haven't gotten a penny. Well, let's make an important distinction. Using a little bit of the Clinton playbook, parsing some words, Hunter Biden has not received a penny yet. That's right. That's true. But look at liberalfactcheck.org. Even they recognize Hunter Biden stands to make millions of dollars when the private equity's funds and their profits are ultimately distributed. One expert valued Biden's stake at around, at least $20 million. Even Biden's own attorney admitted that he has acquired significant equity in the fund equal to, quote, about 10% of the company's registered capital. Remember, $20 million. No experience in private equity investing, and he gets it 10 days after he goes with his dad to China. Now, does that compromise his father? Let's see. Well, we helped your son out. we got him all this money. I expect you, to help us out. Must be nice to be the vice president's son in this case. What we saw on ABC is a blatant attempt to spin and deflect and lie in what is a growing real scandal that's not going away. But despite the softball questions, Hunter still struggled. Couldn't help himself. Take a look.
Did you and your father ever discuss Ukraine?
No. As I said, the only time was after a news account. It wasn't a discussion in any way. There's no but to this. No, we never did.
Your dad said, I hope you know what you're doing.
I hope you know what you're doing.
I do.
And I said, I do.
You were paid $50,000 a month for your position?
Look, I'm a private citizen. One thing that I don't have to do is sit here and open my kimono as it relates to how much money I make or did or didn't. But it's all been reported. This is what becomes a distraction because I have to sit here and answer these questions. And so that's why I've committed that I won't serve on any boards or I won't work directly for any foreign entities when my dad becomes president.
Do you think that should be a rule across the board for any administration?
No. Look, that's the rule that I'm going to adhere to.
Do you regret being on the board to begin with?
No, I don't regret being on the board.
What did he do to earn the $50,000 a month when he had no expertise in Ukraine, oil, gas, or energy? Good question, and it is a public company, apparently. Let's get this straight. You can make millions of dollars if you are in an apparent pay-to-play scheme, leveraging your father and his name and his power, and the media mob, they'll have your back. Or you could do what 4 Democratic senators did and formally threaten to withhold funds from the country of Ukraine if its prosecutors refuse to investigate their political opponent, Donald Trump. That's what they're accusing Trump of. And by the way, there are no calls for those senators to be removed from office. No investigations from the House Intel Committee and the cowardly shifty Schiff. And by the way, when President Trump mentions Biden in a totally innocuous phone call with no quid pro quo at all, then it becomes a national crisis. Just like Hillary has a real dossier, Trump, 4 investigations, no collusion. Democrats don't care about the dirty Russian dossier with lies used to spy on a candidate, a transition team, and a president. President's phone call with Ukraine was so routine that the cowardly Schiff actually had to fabricate his own version of the transcript, read it out loud in an official committee hearing. By the way, for that little stunt, we now have 125 Republicans co-sponsoring a resolution to censor Schiff for his fraudulent dramatic reading. By the way, where are the rest of you Republicans? Maybe it's time for you to get on board here. And maybe you need to sign it as well. Every Republican, by the way, those are the Republicans, you need to sign the censure bill. You guys right there, you need to get on board. Also, every Republican senator, they need to sign a document saying that they've read this transcript of the President of the United States speaking to the Ukrainian president. And we, the undersigned, see no wrongdoing and no impeachable offenses and don't waste our time. I think that should go out as well. So they'll know ahead of time they're never going to impeach the president over this farce, this hoax, this conspiracy. And Schiff's fraud, that can't go unchecked. Let's be clear. That guy is the biggest congenital, pathological liar in Congress. For 3 years, he's lied about Trump-Russia collusion. He kept telling we, the people, that he had all the evidence, clear evidence of collusion. Well, he also lied about the whistleblower on national TV. He said, we have not spoken directly with the whistleblower, but we'd like to. Well, his office had been in contact with the fake whistleblower even before his report was filed. And now we know Schiff's office was advising him, get a lawyer and make a claim to the inspector general. In other words, the whole thing was nothing but an orchestrated charade to get Trump. Shocking. And now Schiff won't even bring the whistleblower, friend of Schiff, also a friend of Joe Biden, in to testify. Why not? Because then those questions would be asked. And then Schiff's corruption would be exposed. And by the way, it's just the latest example of Democrats and the mob and the media and the deep state working together hand in hand to undo the results of a free and fair election. They've done this for 3 years. They've been throwing anything and everything at the wall in the hopes that it will take down a duly elected president. Russia collusion, Ukrainian quid pro quo, Trump's taxes, stormy conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory, all because they didn't like how we, the people, voted. But I have some news for these radical, socialist, extreme Democrats. Now, we know how this story is going to end. Well, the president will not be removed from office. 2020 will be a referendum on your destructive your rage, your obsessive, compulsive, psychotic behavior.